Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Takedown, Subverting Power, Radical Thought. Today I have a guest with me. David, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience here?
Well, hello, I'm David Kulma, and I'm the Green candidate for Congress here in South Carolina's 5th Congressional District. The election is 8 days from today on June 20th.
All right, June 20th. Tell us, once again, you're running for the Green Party, correct?
Yes, Green Party.
All right, that's what I like to hear. I like outside people. Those people who've been following me, they should know that I really do appreciate people running outside of the main parties. But let me ask you, before we actually get into the heavy stuff that I always like to talk about, let's first talk about you. Why don't you take us through kind of like who you are, what you're about, and how you feel that kind of shaped your politics. And if you've had most people transition over time, kind of take us through that. We got plenty of time to let's have a conversation.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so just a few things about me. I'm a professional musician and music teacher in Rock Hill, South Carolina. My wife and I have lived here for about almost 3.5 years. I teach at Winthrop University in Rock Hill, South Carolina, as an adjunct professor in the music department. I just finished my 5th year there. My degrees are in oboe performance and music composition from Kent State University in Ohio. That's where I grew up in. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, Lakewood, the first suburb west. In terms of the politics of this, I really didn't necessarily pay much attention to it while I was a kid. Being a musician, I had my nose to the grindstone of learning how to make oboe reeds, which is, if you don't know anything about that, is an excessive way to spend time. But my sort of political awakening happened over the past few years here, as I was working to find a way to teach the classes I taught my music students better. So one of the things about so I've been teaching for about 8 years freshman music classes to music majors. And that way that those classes are set up, it's a sequence over 4 semesters. And so the content is very, very precise and expected, which means we basically run the students through an educational ringer that they are variously prepared or unprepared for. So you end up having a lot of students who are kind of struggle with this, and it doesn't really seem fair to, as it's going on, watching it happen. So I was looking for ways to better teach my students, and I came across, which is something called flipped pedagogy, which is an idea that we do classes in reverse, meaning that you do homework in class and the lectures happen outside of class. So I would make videos about the material, and then we would spend time in class actually applying the information in class to try to do it better. And the students really enjoyed the classes a lot more, and it was very clear that I was doing something to sort of help them rather than just being the asshole standing up in front of them telling them we're all doing something terrible. It's not something I ever did, but a lot of professors do that, right? So through that, I met the people who I met doing this kind of teaching. The question came to mind, if we're going to change the structure to make it better for the students, what would happen if we changed the content? Which, of course, when you're talking to a lot of professors of music theory, they get kind of upset. So what I learned was that they don't want you to question the content necessarily. What I learned, so it moved me into something called critical pedagogy. If you're familiar with that, that's the ideas of Paulo Freire, if I never know how to say his name, the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, or the teaching work of Bell Hooks. Their book is called Teaching to Transgress. And it's all teaching specifically based around consciousness raising of the students in front of you and focusing on society, and sort of politics is inherently part of this whole project. It is a very clearly left political project as a teaching tool in order to teach students about their lives and themselves and their society and whatever information we're talking about at the time in a way that makes them better able to see the machinations and the systems of our society so that they are learning what's best.
That's very dangerous.
Right. Well, of course it is, right? It's radical pedagogy. So It doesn't necessarily translate over into teaching freshman music theory classes, because freshman music theory classes are all about a bunch of white dead people from Europe. And a lot of my students at the school I teach at is of a predominantly white institution. It has the largest percentage of black students, largest minority student population. It's like 35% non-white. So it means that in a room full of people with a lot of African-American students, we're talking about dead white men all the time. And that's not right. So, and it's built into the curriculum that it's going to be about this particular kind of music and not this other type of music. So as I was getting more and more frustrated with this and trying to find ways to connect the music that my students actually listen to the material that we're covering, I realized that the only way I was going to be able to do this was to teach a class for non-majors, and where I got to design the class myself.
Oh, so you had to go outside of the major? So there was that much pushback in terms of sticking to the rigid curricula?
Yes, they're not necessarily. One thing I have to say is that college professors, by and large, are quite liberal people, and they have very progressive ideas about people and what should be studied and what shouldn't. It's just that the strictures that we've built up over a century or more of academic rulemaking have made it so that this is stuff we talk about and this is stuff we don't. And that's just the way it is. And we're trying to break it open in certain ways, but a lot of people are very tradition bound because it's the stuff I learned in school. If you're the professor, I'm going to teach the stuff I know best. So it was just the strictures of the music major curriculum made it so that I couldn't do what I wanted. So I created this new class called Rock and Popular Music, where I have my students specifically choose the material we talk about, and then I give them a structure where I give them a listening list, a reading each week, and then an assignment and we have classroom discussions. And the discussions are my goal, is to sit and talk with them about music and then society and their own lives in ways that are meaningful. To give an example, my students one semester chose to talk about protest music for a week. So I had to go find a book about protest songs, and I made photocopies of some of the stuff. And we read about, We Shall Overcome. I made a listening list that went through Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn, all the way up to the song that Common and John Legend made for Glory, which had just come out, the Glory song, which from the Ava DuVernay movie, Selma. So
let me ask you a quick question, not to break where we're going here.
Sure.
But the first thing that pops into my mind is there a way, because certainly, students may not be interested in things of the past, but there are certain things that, still need to be learned in a sense, like for their importance and what they did. Maybe not everything to the exact detail, but, I think sometimes in teaching, the teacher's goal is to pour as much onto the student as they can, because they know they're only going to retain about 10% of what they hear anyway.
Right. Well, it's about, there are sort of two models for the way metaphors we use for education. One is the opening up someone's head and pouring information in, like what you just described. And the other is more about having people decide what kind of things they want to do, and then giving them the freedom to do those things, and giving them like a string along a line of things, and they move along a string that is malleable. So that metaphor is more like what I'm going for, meaning that, so there are specific things I want them to know, but it's not specifically historical information, right? If they want to know about when Bob Dylan went electric in the 1960s, I'll tell them about that. And we can learn about Bob Dylan. It'll be wonderful, because Bob Dylan is a great case study in a lot of different things, including being anti-war in the early 60s, right? Masters of War is one of those songs I chose. So the other option is that, let me go back to that. So from there, it means that I am constantly injecting historical information and different ways of thinking into classroom discussions. So for example, one of the common opinions among 18 to 20-year-olds that I've had over semesters is that music is worse, the musicians are less it's harder to tell difference between good and bad musicians because of things like auto-tune and the various ways that music production is made. Basically meaning if you're pretty and can do a certain set of things, we can make music that makes you sound good no matter what, right? And so that there are musicians who are very bad at being musicians but are very famous, as if this is a new circumstance. And I tell them that no, there's a band called Milli Vanilli in the early 90s that won a Grammy Award for a best song, even though they never performed it. Then I tell them about a teen heartthrob of the early 1960s named Fabian, who was very famous for other things, but he got some really famous songs at the time. And if you go back and listen to him sing, he's terrible, right? So the idea that popularity is somehow tied directly, what used to be tied directly to musical skill, is not a true thing. The thing they're identifying as new. There is they are right that musical technology has made this more difficult, has made this easier to do, but it's humanity and the way it deals with popularity and famousness and these sorts of things and what people decide to put money behind and all the sort of machinations of large businesses in the music industry, that's consistent across time. Is it? Yeah, absolutely. You know, the idea, no. Okay, so you have to realize that, well, we're supposed to be talking about other things, but let me get there. Small bit here. So the music industry before there were recordings, so things you could buy in a box, like a disc, right? We don't buy discs anymore, but we can. Before we could buy discs, what you would buy is a piece of sheet music. Here's a piece of sheet music that I'm learning right now for a concert I have to do after the election's over. So this is, music was in that shape. And it meant that where to make money on music was through those sheets of paper. And so you would have this whole industry built up around writing songs down. And then there were literal storefronts where, this is where the phrase Tin Pan Alley comes from, is that they were on Broadway or off of Broadway now because it's sort of moved. That there was an area where there were music stores and there were musicians who would play on the piano and they would make the songs better than they were written down so that you would buy them. They would play better chords. They'd play awesomer things. And then you'd go home and learn the song yourself on your little keyboard or something and it wouldn't be as nice. Right? So there's that level of fakeness going on.
Well, what I was going to say is, I think when you said like what people associate with fame and who gets put out there and stuff like that, I was like, we have to remember that, celebrity and fame are mostly objects of culture, and culture in our society is largely shaped by class power.
Right.
So we have to kind of be cognizant of things like that before we start assuming that just because somebody's famous means they're the best. There's probably people that are definitely very, very, very good, very, very talented, never get anywhere and never get any recognition. And that's just kind of like the chaotic nature of the world, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So that's something we talk about.
But let's move, because I can talk about music. I used to play music for a long, long time. I can talk about that.
Let me say the last section of the reason I was telling this story.
Okay.
Is that it's not very long. That process required me to go learn a whole shit ton about our society and how fucked up it is. The racism, the sexism, just all the horde of history, the ways in which class destroys our lives and builds up other things, right? All of that stuff was something I had to learn about to give all of this music a context that I could explain and talk about with my students. And through that process, I was being subjected to ideas, right? Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire are radical left people with radical left ideas. I was learning about intersectional feminism and all these things, right? And I'm talking about them with my students. And as this was going on, was the that one semester or so around this time of learning this was when Michael Brown was murdered, and then when the non-indictment went down right around Thanksgiving, Tamir Rice was killed. He was murdered.
Yes.
I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. Tamir Rice, 12-year-old boy, killed in 2 seconds. that really made me fucking angry. I got a speeding ticket that next morning because I wasn't paying attention to the road. I was so upset. So, and I did protests in my classes that day. So my political shift to the left here, because I had voted for Democrats, but I hadn't really paid much attention.
We've all done it. There was no shame in it.
Right. So then it was that I had been put into a position where there were a lot of people on Twitter I was following that I would not have seen otherwise. And the way they reacted to all this stuff was completely different from the way the mainstream media did. So I was seeing all of this stuff and it was like, holy shit, this is all really fucked up. So it was a awakening for me in a way. And so after all of this time and the 2016 election and all of these things and slowly talking more and more with my students about this, by the time we get to now and Mick Mulvaney, who was my congressman, becomes Trump's OMB director, I say someone needs to talk about progressive ideas in this election. I was really excited by Bernie Sanders, and nobody else was willing to stand up. And the Democrats were going to put up a Goldman Sachs tax attorney, and the Republicans now have this wealthy land developer that I said, since nobody else looks like they're going to do this, I'm going to stand up and run for Congress.
Now, interesting enough, did you, was it, so I'm assuming that you didn't necessarily have like a breakaway from the Democratic Party, kind of like me. I've basically I've gotten to the point now where I'm so biased against them. Sometimes I have to check myself when I'm looking at them. And I realize not everybody shares my level of
malice,
my level of disgust for what that brand represents to me. That's not what it represents to everybody. And that's not saying everybody who carries the name or carries that D next to their name is the devil or something like that. I'm not saying that by any means necessary, but by any means at all. But why don't you kind of tell me what brought you to maybe running for the Green Party?
Sure. So what
was the trial there? It's
a mixture of a couple of things. So I during the election, I watched a lot of the Young Turks. With Cenk Uygur.
Heartburn.
And and Democracy Now!, which I watch still as much as I can, at least to get the headlines. And so I was really interested in Cenk's idea of, and him, Kyle Kulinski, their idea of the Justice Democrats. And I literally contacted the group or whatever, and I said, are you going to put somebody up for this 2017 special election? And they gave me an email back a few days later saying, no, we're going to focus on 2018. And I was like, well, shit, because somebody has to. I liked the platform basically, and I wanted somebody to run on that platform. And I thought this election would be a good sort of marketing opportunity, or if they could actually win, that'd be great, right? Because this is a safely Republican district, supposedly, according to all of the political science information. It's a +9 district, whatever that means. Oh, and okay. So after I contacted them, 7 Republicans announced, because everybody the Republican is supposed to win this, and no Democrats announced at all.
So once again, a seat left unchallenged.
Well, you can't let this happen, right? They can't let nobody run. And so I contacted the local Democratic Party and I said, is somebody going to run for this? I don't want to, but I would be willing to be the person to talk about progressive ideas. I want somebody to talk about these ideas in this election. And and then I immediately emailed the Green Party because I knew the Green Party, because I knew there was one in South Carolina. And I said, I just emailed the Democrats telling them this, I would be willing to run if nobody's going to run on progressive ideas. And the replies I got back from the Democrats were, we need your help. We have a candidate with excellent credentials, which excellent credentials to a woman who works in the Democratic Party is the thing that makes sirens go off in my head. Just like that's not something that I trust, right? Because excellent credentials is Hillary Clinton. Excellent credentials is Joe Biden. Excellent credentials is all these people they've done some good things, but there are a lot of horrible things they've done. Because I really don't identify as a Democrat, although I voted for them plenty of times.
Again, you're preaching to the choir.
Right, exactly. So and the Greens replied with a candidate questionnaire, which I went, holy shit, what? Not planning on doing that. So I was a little worried about the Democrats. So I met with one of the guys from the Green Party, who's now my campaign manager, and we sat in my house for 4 hours and talked about what like this would look like. And when I asked him, I said, "So, what do you think we should do? Do you think we should do this or not?" And he said, "That's weird. I don't know. I'm usually trying to talk people into or out of running for things." But he's like, "No, I think you should do it." So we found out who the Democrat was going to be, and it's who he is.
And you don't have to say his name, but can you go back and tell us the occupations of the people that are running, that you're running?
Yeah. So the Republican is a wealthy multi-millionaire land developer. He owns a lot of land in the area, and he's made a crap ton of money doing so. He's been in the state legislature for the past few years, and he resigned his seat to run in this election. He had a fundraiser last week with the leadership in the House leadership in Washington. So he's already in the let's make money off of being a politician land here.
Okay.
He's raised $1.3 million and put $495,000 of a loan. He's loaning the campaign $495,000. It's like an astronomical amount of money for a 3-month election. The Democrat is a retired tax attorney who worked as a managing director at Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong, and before that in Japan somewhere. Then before that, he worked for a while as a tax attorney at ExxonMobil, and then before that he worked in the as a Ways and Means Committee. He was as a staffer, and he worked at a period of time in the Justice Department. He's now retired, and he's in his 60s.
So we basically have, a corporate lawyer who kind of has some ins and outs inside the Democratic Party establishment versus a land developer.
Right. So it's piece of shit versus piece of shit. Right?
Well,
I usually don't say that in public, but I'm happy to say it today. They seem like they're both very nice men in public, but it doesn't matter if they're nice or they love their families or anything. They are guaranteed, if either of them goes into Congress, to be bought by large corporations and to do things that will harm regular people, no matter what they say today. So I am not. It's about standing up and talking about helping actual people with advocating real progressive ideas that will actually help and empower regular, poor, working class and middle class Americans. So that's why I'm here. And so after finding out who the Democrat was, we decided to run with it. And I've been in the election, and I've been in lots and lots of forums and debates so far. So I'm actually getting some play.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm actually glad to hear that. Is it by independent outlets? Is it by the local media, or what's going on in South Carolina?
It's a mixture, really. I'm not really sure why this ended up happening. There was a debate in Newberry, South Carolina, which is on the edge of the district. It's a very large 11-county gerrymandered district in northern South Carolina. It stretches. Oh, by the way, for anybody who's interested, if you've seen House of Cards, this district is Frank Underwood's district. If you want, there's a photo of me with the peachoid on our social media if you want to.
F you, Frank Underwood.
Right. And I would be absolutely nothing like Frank Underwood. Absolutely nothing. But so it stretches like this 3.5 hours from one side to the other. The first debate in Newberry, they had put in, there's a local party in South Carolina called the American Party, which is a centrist party. And they were having him be in this debate that had most of the Republican primary contenders and the 3 Democrats. And my campaign manager talked them into putting me into the debate, at which point I got to say lots of things that made some of the right-wing Republicans like flusteredly angry with me, which was joyful.
But needless to say, you actually got to be on stage with them just more than that one occasion.
Right. And so from there,
making them fluster.
Every forum after that, so that was the only real debate. Well, the rest of them were all forums, but there were 3 or 4 more. We had a third-party forum at the local university that me and the American Party and the Libertarian were at. We just had a forum, and we've had 2 NAACP forums in the past couple of weeks where I've been on the stage and I was getting most of the applause. So I'm actually getting the opportunity to get out to voters and to excite them with my message of my platform and the things I'm talking about.
Yeah, and see, I'm excited that you take it upon yourself, because I tell this to people all the time, and my viewers will attest to this, that when I'm talking about these ideas and talking about how something may work, or trying to really get out there, I'm really trying to introduce a new way of thinking where I'm telling people, if there's nobody out there that's worthy, maybe you should step up and be that person and get people to help you and make that happen. And what I want people to do really is to understand that if you want change, you may have to build it yourself. No one's going to give it to you.
Exactly.
And I think on the left in particular, we've kind of forgotten that. We've kind of gotten to this point where we're waiting on, so I'm just waiting on somebody to come. I'm just waiting on this to happen. Or, maybe we can get a new guy or a good guy. And it's like, that guy could be you. Right. It could be your neighbor. It could be your brother. It could be whoever, random Joe Schmo on the street that just decides that they want to do something different, and they have both the strength of will and the courage to actually go outside of where we are trapped right now and get out there and fight for it. And I'm just kind of waiting for, enough people to kind of reach that critical mass. And by the way, I've just come back from the left forum, guys. And so I'm, brimming with new analyses and new information. And I'm just so pleased and so whatever. And I have to check myself, because obviously, you can't go from 0 to 60, in 0.1 seconds, right? So I have to come back down and realize, okay, go back to the way I was before I went down there. When you're immersed in that, you just want to radicalize every mind you come into contact with. It just doesn't work that way.
No, it's there. I've had multiple conversations with some very conservative people here, and they are very nice to me at first. And then when they find out what I'm running on, there's often the question of, and I'd love to know how you're going to pay for that. And then they're just sort of the very, they're still nice, but you can tell that it's straining on them to be nice to me.
Man,
that's okay. No, that's fully expected. I mean, this is South Carolina we're talking about. This is a place where people assume you're conservative unless told otherwise. And so, like, I had an interview today, which went very well, but in a local media outlet that'll be up in a few days. And I mean, he was asking me right-wing questions a fair amount of the time, or framing questions from the right. And so I was having to basically say things that were just outside of, like, he asked me if I, about capitalism. And I told him, well, we don't have capitalism in this country. And he kind of just was shocked that I said something like that. So.
Oh, well, now see, at least, it sounds to me like you're taking the tack that I would take if I were to run for something, is when they give these loaded, badly framed questions, I would instantly reframe the question or reject the entire premise of what he's asking outright in the question itself, so that people can understand that, you can't just give me any kind of question like that and I have to answer within those bounds. Basically, you have to kind of terraform your own landscape, out in the political arena, especially now since we're so far to the right.
Right.
I spoke to someone today, and I just was trying to get them to acknowledge that, one of the things that we run into all the time is that somehow the private market is efficient and that the public market is inefficient, and that the private market makes markets efficient. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. How can somebody offer you the same good made out of the same material for the same price, but they have the burden of a profit incentive?
Right.
Like, where does the profit come from?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly what happens with healthcare. So
exactly.
So, I'm advocating for universal healthcare. I'm telling the people here that I will be a co-sponsor of HR 676. That's John Conyers' bill that he puts in every year that now has more than 100 Democratic co-sponsors. That is the Improved and Expanded Medicare for All Act, which would just save us $400 billion at least a year. That's billion with a B, and actually cover everybody so that nobody was dying because of their income, and people wouldn't have to use GoFundMe to raise costs because they had a heart attack, all these kind of things. And, I get cheers when I say these things out loud. So,
yeah, see, look, you brought me back to reality once again. I sort of got off to start talking again, but hey, let's explore. Like you've already mentioned that you're in favor of John Conyers' bill.
Yeah.
Let's kind of talk about what would you say are like the pillars of your politics, and then we're gonna move into a new section in like 2 or 3 minutes, but just in 2 minutes, kind of lay out like the pillars of your politics, like the major points to you, and then if you're willing, I would like you to stay and speak about the next topic. I'm going to talk to Salam, one of our writers here at Progressive Army. We're going to basically debate the merits or really have a discussion, not necessarily a debate, but it's probably going to turn out that way about, universal basic income and the federal job guarantee.
Sure. Well, I'll just run down the platform. So I mentioned universal health care. The second thing is the idea that, so focusing on healthcare, education, and housing as human rights. So first part is that healthcare platform. Second thing is that public education is a public good and we should fund it that way, meaning that we should use public education funding should only go to public schools, and that we should end standardized testing. For college education, it means free public college and universities, making those things free. Expanding bankruptcy law to include education loans, and then forgiving and wiping away all student loan debt. So
let me ask you a question. If you support wiping away student loan debt, why would you need to alter the bankruptcy law?
Well, it's because
it's a one or another kind of deal, or
well, it's one would eliminate debt now, and the other one would. So the idea is that wiping away student loan debt isn't necessarily mean. I would like it to be well. So it's a three-pronged problem, right? That we need to make college free. It's not. We need to do something about people who've already paid shit tons of money for college right now. And then we need to make sure that people who take out loans, because people are going to still take out education loans for private education, that privates, if you go to like Harvard or something, that if you go there, that you can then get out from under that loan if you can't afford to pay it back because you can't do whatever economic thing we expect you to do. So you need a way out from under that, and you can't currently do that in this country, and they can garnish your wages or whatever for that. So
and see, look, you're already sounding like a very, very, very nice person, because for some reason, I don't know if it was like the asshole in me or something like that. It just, right then I was thinking to myself, well, if we make public college free and we have wiping away student loan debt for public institutions, why would we subsidize the private colleges? I would think that, I would largely want them to wither and die.
So I don't personally care about whether or not private institutions exist, but there are private institutions that fulfill certain roles. So, for example, there are historically Black colleges and universities that are private institutions, right?
That is true.
So I just said Harvard because it was the first one off the top of my head.
Yeah, and even when I was thinking about it, I just attached myself to the Ivy League and like the ivory tower types of institutions, right?
Right. So
I was assuming there would maybe be an exemption made, or maybe a way to publicize. I mean, bring those private institutions into the public sector, especially for like the state schools that are historically Black colleges and universities.
Yes, exactly. So I agree with you on that point. The reason I'm saying the three things I'm saying is that I think that we really can do the first one, that is making the public colleges free. And to me, the other two parts are sort of a thing to do that I think I can get other people to actually sign on to. And the thing that I actually think we need really hugely, like we need to sort of do those things together. So it's that getting a lot of people on board with wiping away college debt. Like wiping away debt is one of those ideas that a lot of people just immediately kind of react negatively to. So it's sort of like, do I expect to be able to get through a Republican Congress an idea like that? No. But I think I can get the Republican legislature in the Republican Congress to actually, I can shame them into getting into expanding bankruptcy law. That's something I could think I can actually get some other people to sign up for and get it through as an amendment on something. That's an achievable goal in my mind.
I see. You're a lot more optimistic than me. I don't believe a Republican can be shamed into much, but you can force them to do something.
The example I have is that Bernie Sanders is able to get Republicans to do things when he was in Congress, when he was in the House, that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So there are things to do and things that are possible, and I don't see the role of a Green Party House person not just only as the sort of the bully pulpit of I'm screaming about things that people are not going to pay attention to. There is actual fundamental, actual work that a person like me can do if I'm not stuck in the money machine that either party is. So there are actual things that I could do that would actually make a good for actual people in this country.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's why I'm glad to have you on the show. That's why I'm glad that, you know, speaking to you and hearing about your politics, and I want our audience to see that. Now, I think at this point, the big topic is going to be, you know, everybody's getting ready, you know, warming up or whatever.
Sure.
Salam, why don't you say hello to our audience? Are you with us?
Hi, Nick. Can you hear me?
I actually can't hear you. Salam, if you can give us a mic check, we actually can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
It's just, for me, it's very soft. I can sort of hear him very softly.
Oh yeah, I can't hear him at all. Richard, can you help out with that? While we're trying to get that situated,
Sure.
I just want to remind everybody that basically today we're going to be having an open discussion, a semi-debate on universal basic income and the federal job guarantee. It's my position that I'll just come out and tell you that my position is I favor the federal job guarantee with provisions for those who cannot work or their situations are not conducive to working. And I think kind of how I frame it is that the goal would be to have more money into the hands of individual people and have the federal government as the employer for those who can't or won't work for the private sector for whatever reason, so that they produce goods and services. And if you're producing goods and services, basic economics will tell you, so long as goods and more services and goods are produced, and having more money in supply will not have as much of an inflationary effect as just giving people more money without changing the amount of production. And I think that's been kind of like the crux of the argument to me, that if you basically give out a universal basic income, and I know everybody's seen it now. UBI is like everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. Everywhere you go, there's multiple TED Talks on it. You can type it on YouTube. It's all over the place. And there's a reason for that. There is a reason that it's so popular and it's spreading like this and it's getting so much play in media circles and on TV and in places where you wouldn't even hear them talking about it. Libertarians are talking about the UBI, and some of them are expressing support for it. And that should not necessarily mean it's bad, but that shouldn't necessarily take over the conversation where we don't talk about other solutions. And I would argue that the federal job guarantee just has a lot more benefits than the UBI, just in the way it can be implemented and what it helps us be able to do. Salam, if you're still there, I'm trying to kind of talk to fill the space while we get your technical issues worked out. You can go ahead and speak to us again. Oh, everybody can hear him except for me? Yeah, I don't hear anything from him either. Why don't you tell us, David, kind of where you fall on the situation? On this discussion, excuse me, I said situation.
Jobs guarantee versus, I would personally support a federal jobs program, or this guarantee sounds good to me. I mean, I've been focusing on other issues during the campaign. I'm a supporter of doing either of these things. The way you framed it is interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, but in terms of not increasing production. So if I understand correctly, the way you're framing this idea is based around creating, how does this relate to growth versus like?
Well, the idea that the way I put it out there, and the reason why I put it out there in that way is that there are many things that we need as a society to be done, but there's no profit incentive to actually do it. So the private sector does not cover these things. Right. And that demand for those things could be served by a federal job guarantee. And we would have both increased goods to the population, increased well-being to our citizens and service to our citizens, at the same time as providing a place where people could be employed. And not only like, a menial job where people, say they want to be free from toil. We wouldn't be trying to create toil. We would be creating real jobs that enrich communities that people actually need to do, that the society actually needs. And that's why I favor the federal job guarantee, because it can be a vehicle to achieve that. Mm-hmm. And so I think oftentimes when we talk about the UBI, one of the downsides I see is that it seems to me that a lot of the proponents of the UBI really are using it as a means to shirk or kind of like get away from the responsibility society has to individuals. They say, oh, we will give you a pittance, so now you cannot complain. We paid you a universal basic income, so you have everything you need. And what I will tell you right now is income is not necessarily happiness. And if everybody has it, with the way prices work and with the way value works, it basically is worthless.
So what I can say is that it's possible to view the opposite in a similar way, in terms of that a job isn't happiness either.
No, it is not. But what I will say, I'm not selling this as happiness. I'm selling this as a federal job guarantee at a living wage and providing goods that the public sector that the public actually wants and needs. This could be anything ranging from childcare, taking care of the elderly. This could be repairing homes. This could be teaching children music. This could be putting on plays. This should be teaching philosophy, teaching the arts, doing whatever. It could be building bicycles. It could be repaving the roads. There's stuff that needs to be done all over the place that's just not getting done. And a federal job guarantee will go about making that happen, whereas a UBI would not. On top of those things, just the sheer merit of what we can achieve with the federal job guarantee, let's also talk about the fact that if there is a competitor for talent and employment in general, it will cause the private sector to have to treat their employees better as well. So not only have we provided a thing that will produce better goods for people, we now have a stable means of employment, or a mechanism that we can use to employ people that will actually act as a counterbalance to the weight of the private sector in terms of employment. The government already does these things as it is, but at a federal job guarantee, at a living wage, it would be even more powerful, because that means everybody who has jobs in the private sector would now have a choice. You can stay and make someone else rich, or you can work for your community and have a living wage.
I mean, there's not necessarily anything I disagree with you about those things. I'm just, so I don't necessarily know a lot. I haven't done a lot of research into the federal jobs guarantee in terms of an idea of something to implement. So I'm just going to ask questions, assuming, I'm sorry, I don't remember the other guy's name. Is he going to be capable of speaking with us?
Salam, can we get your audio working there, or what's going on?
It appears not. So
Richard, would you like to come in and speak on this? And audience, I know there's a few of you watching right now. I would really like to hear what you have to say as well. I've been watching some of the comments here, and some of these things are pretty funny. Others are a little bit more serious, but I will welcome your interaction on this. I really want to have a discussion on this, because I'm really pushing for a federal job guarantee, and I think the UBI can be used as some sort of hybridized solution, because, like I said, I prefer the federal job guarantee for those who can work and can provide something. And if you can't, that's when a basic income will be provided for you. Or let's say you have 3 or 4 children and you're a single mom. Obviously, raising children is a job unto itself. I believe you should still be given a living wage, for doing those things. But I'm just saying, like, let's just start thinking about how we can do stuff like that. But I believe the UBI, without changing the way our system works, without changing the way employment is done, a UBI really won't amount to much. Prices will rise. They'll suck that up in terms of housing and food prices and other goods, and it'll amount to nothing. And then on top of that, there's the political danger that because you have a UBI, we no longer need to have food stamps. Because you have a UBI, we don't need a federal housing program. Because you have a UBI, we don't need all these social welfare programs. And that's a real danger. That is something that will likely come with the UBI. That's a real danger, and that's something that has to be acknowledged by the left. You don't have those type of issues when you're talking about a federal jobs guarantee.
Do you?
I wish you could hear me.
No, I can hear him, but it's not very loud.
I can't hear him at all.
Can you hear me, Nick?
Can anybody in the audience verify whether they can hear Salam or not?
Go ahead and speak a little bit, Salam.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me now.
I can hear you, finally.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, my apologies for the technical challenges that we had. Nick, you said a lot of things about UBI that I wanted to jump in, but I couldn't get the chance to.
Okay, well, I mean,
Well,
now you're on. Let's hear it.
Okay, so the first thing that you mentioned is that first, there needs to be a general understanding of UBI, Universal Basic Income. So the beauty of UBI is that it is essentially universal, which means that every single person would receive a paycheck, regardless of their income, regardless of if they're employed or not. And the advantage of this over any other program is that it takes away the stigma of applying. It ends poverty immediately because you would provide income to those at the level of, depending on the community or the country, you would eliminate the poverty line. But on top of that, no one has to request, no one has to apply, no one has to be eligible to receive that additional fund. You are, by definition, because it's universal basic income, it's stigma for nobody will be called a moocher in that end. Have the same whether you're rich or not, and that's a feature as part of the UBI that unfortunately other programs do not offer.
Let me ask you a question.
That I wanted to note is that.
Go ahead.
That I wanted to note is that from a progressive perspective, both of the ideas is absolutely great. I'm not going to go here and say that a job guarantee is a bad idea. What I was trying to say here is that from a progressive perspective, we need to find ways to end poverty. We need to find ways to help those that have. And in what I was hoping for in this debate is that the UBI is more superior than job guarantee program, but I do not want to sound as if I am against that approach. If that is approach at any point was made available, whether it's at state level, whether it's at the country level, whether it's in the United States, Canada, or United Kingdom, a big supporter of it.
So now, we have
let me know what you think.
Because I'm a profound supporter of the federal job guarantee, but not the UBI. And the reason why I don't support the UBI is because, like I said, as long as the dynamics of our system remain the same, if you implement a UBI, a universal basic income, all you will do is offset the system, but you won't change its dynamics. You will not end poverty by giving everybody a check.
Why wouldn't that be the case?
Because what happens when you have an increase in money and no concomitant increase in the production of goods and services, that money becomes inflationary and it'll be absorbed into the prices, and the relative dynamic will remain the same. No. Scarcity will be imposed by the price.
No, not at all. Inflation. This is governed by a formula called MV equals to PY. This formula is not controversial in any way. All scientists, all economic scientists, at least at a very large percent of it, would agree to that. And MV, the M stands for the amount of money that is injected into the economy, basically the amount of printed money. V is the velocity of money. And then on the other side of the equation, it's the P, which is the average price. And whenever there's increase to the average price, that's what, and Y is the total output. So when we could look at UBI and when you look at job federal,
but remember what I said.
Federal
I said
guarantee,
with no
you will
concomitant
notice
increase in
that
production of goods, which is your output, correct?
No, but that's what I'm trying to get at, is that no, correct. But the output has been deemed by most scientists that it will remain near constant, whether it is with a UBI or without a UBI. I didn't say constant, I said near constant. And the same thing when it comes to the velocity of money, there will be an increase to the velocity of money, a modest increase, whether it is any form of policy that will money from the rich to the poor, there will be a modest increase because poor people and basically reinvest every penny that they get. They live paycheck to paycheck. Unfortunately, this is the way it is currently, and that will increase the velocity of money. But when it comes to if any proponent of UBI is asking you to go ahead and print money at proposal, then you're absolutely correct. I would be the first person against it, and most proponents of UBI would be against it. UBI is not inflationary. Is that it's redistributing what is currently available in, whether it is from the government or from additional progressive taxation, born by that formula that I just mentioned earlier, that we are mentioning of not basically printing money in the United States or the Eurozone or whichever. There will not be an increase in inflation beyond the 2% to 5% that is expected on an annual basis.
Okay, so I'm well familiar with that formula, but I believe we're starting from two different premises. I'm under the premise that the funding from this would come through money creation, not from redistributed taxation.
That's incorrect.
Well,
it's progressive taxation as well. Let's talk about funding it. So when it comes to funding it, first of all, there are a lot of programs that can be replaced. So programs such as welfare, required. And I don't have the list of all the programs, but there's about 12 to 15 programs that can be replaced without any impact, because the UBI in its simplicity can cover all of those benefits that come from those different programs, which also have additional costs of administration. The UBI is extremely easy to administer. Finally, there needs to be a form of what's called a progressive taxation, so that those who are the very rich, they need to fund what is remaining of what is required, so that the population or the society is able to receive that annual check. And it was calculated, and I could share the proposals. There's one that was written by Scott Santons, I believe just a month ago, that provides in detail how that will be funded, and none of this will require printing any new money.
Okay, so let's say we're going with a redistributive approach, right? Now, here's the problem. When you start to tax wealth and you start to tax, the great incomes, for the large part, that wealth is stagnant, and it is not in circulation. But once you tax and redistribute it, it goes back into circulation.
That's good.
Right?
That's great to stimulate the economy. And in fact,
I think it will stimulate the economy. But I'm wondering how moving money that's not in circulation to circulation, it still does not have any inflationary effect.
Will have an inflationary effect.
Okay,
the
so now
benefits
you
that
are
come.
admitting it will have an inflationary effect. I'm not one of
No,
those people that believe you
no,
can't
but
give
one
benefits
second.
to people
But
because it'll be inflationary.
no,
I don't believe that.
wait. Allow me to complete my thought process, because as I said, and I don't want to go too much into the formula. Once you do this, once you allow for, as you said, stagnant wealth, now that goes back into circulation, even the idea of the minimum wage, it does the same thing. Because once you increase the minimum wage, you do the same thing of giving more people who don't have the capacity or don't have the disposable income have it. So let's be very clear. At any point in time where you are able to increase the velocity of money, what it does is that it increases the output, because that will lead to additional jobs, because there will be more demand, and that will lead to a stimulus of the economy. For example, I believe in 2001, George W. Bush said that go ahead and spend. That's patriotic. And the reason he said that, because the United States was going through a depression, and the only way to turn that was to actually go ahead and spend. So
let me stop you right there, Salam. Guys,
yeah.
right now, this will be the end of our regular broadcast. I'm basically going to continue recording this discussion, and I'm going to continue on. I'm going to basically have it up on the YouTube channel. But if Richard, if you can cut it. And there's a quote that I want to end off with. Give me 1 second. What comes to pass does not come so much because a few people want it to happen, as because the mass of citizens abdicate their responsibility and let things be. Everybody knows that's from Antonio Gramsci. Take a look, take a listen to some of his quotes. He's got a very interesting perspective. I want to leave you guys with that quote to think about, but we're going to close out the regular show and go into the extended discussion.